Does God know all things? We're going to look at that in this segment of Doctrine for Life. When we think about the idea of God knowing all things, it's helpful to understand how we know as people. The Oxford English Dictionary describes to know simply as the ability to distinguish one thing from another. Now, we do that in different ways. If we were to go outside and say, look at something as complex but as simple as a tree, we understand what a tree is because we can reach out and feel it. We can take pictures of it. We can climb it. We can cut it, chop it into wood, make a fire. We understand trees physically because we are physical beings. But the idea of a tree, that is, in our minds, when we imagine a tree or we think about a tree or we, in our minds, design how we're going to utilize a tree to make a table or a chair or whatever it is that we're going to do, we are thinking about that object in an immaterial sense. And as our thoughts engage physical objects, we have both a physical knowledge of that object and a non-physical knowledge of that object. Now, as physical creatures, we have a beginning and an end. That is, we come into this world as learners. Already at conception, our bodies begin to develop, and as soon as that body is developed, it begins to interact with the objects around it. That carries on until death. And that whole process in between the day we're born and the day we die, we learn and accumulate knowledge both through a physical interaction with our world and that physical interaction being the subject of our intellects. And that process or interaction between the two, you could think of in the way that Aristotle defined it. We all have potential. That is, we all have the ability to become something greater than what we previously were. And as we do that, we actuate that potential. That is, we start to live it, and that becomes an active part of who we are. And we grow throughout that process through life. Now, when we talk about God, God is very different in his being. That is, God is the creator. He is the prime mover of all the physical world around us because he created it. It began in his mind, and then he brought it into existence through his power. So when we think about God being all-knowing, we have to think about God in a greater category than we understand our knowledge. And the Bible is very clear in describing this aspect of God's nature. For instance, we read in Psalm 139, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways, for there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me in behind and before and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. David here saying that even from birth, God has known exactly who he is, who he would become. And David himself, as he grew in his knowledge and understanding of this life, became aware of God's knowledge of himself, which is an amazing thought that human beings have the capacity to grow in our knowledge to such an extent that we can be cognizant of the mind of God and his thought for us. And that's because we're made in his image. We were created, and the crown of our existence is that we can know the mind of God. No other creature in creation can do that. No other creature in creation can be described like that. It is only human intelligence that has that capacity. And now, in the age of AI, we are creating intelligences in our own image that reflect that same glory because it is coming through our minds. Now, taking that foundation and looking at the question, is God all-knowing? God as creator, as the mind back of all things, has perfect knowledge of all things. That is, he perfectly understands every distinction of everything that he made. Humanity being the crown of that creation and having a smaller reflection of that mind in the imperfect ability to learn and distinguish all things. God doesn't learn. He already knows all things. He created all things. And when he acts, it's perfectly in line with what he knows. So as far as we go, as far as human beings go, we learn over a process through life. And as those concepts and those ideas come into our minds and as we interact with the physical world, we gain greater precision of the distinctions between things that we interact with in our world. That's what knowledge means. God, being the creator of all things, has perfect knowledge of all distinctions, and therefore he is all-knowing. His mind and his actions are perfectly one. There is nothing there that he needs to learn. So when we talk about God being all-knowing, yes, he is all-knowing. He is the prime mind and prime mover of the intellect and the material world. And we have the wonderful adventure of coming into this world and learning that process for ourselves. And all of that knowledge is designed to point us back to him as the source. It's an amazing adventure, this life, not only to know about God, but to know that he created us to know him in a relationship. If this channel is helpful to you, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, God bless.